Her lips which whisper like reeds on the wind, wet with moisture sprung from a well deep within, whispers like the petals of an iris, the reedy blossom which weathers and is not trodden down for long. 50 to 1 and ne'er to be outdone. Yeah, I wanted to say something before I continue here about Robert Hanson's spoon-fed cases. Basically, this was how he protected his assets back in the 80s and 90s and stuff, with spoon-fed law enforcement cases that he would invoke legal non-disclosure to ensure that his assets were protected, by Title 18 of U.S. Revised Code in regards to retaliation against witnesses and informants and things like that. So basically, what I'm saying here is Anthony Polito out there at UNLV, he was a fine example of what happens when those when those clauses run out, there's a lot of people like this. So like I said, this is why I got really concerned when Valerie banned me from her Facebook pages. That happened about 2 weeks after Robert Hanson died. And like I said, I was really, really taken aback by that, because I've always had her back on this, if you know what I'm saying. It's like being closer to the situation, not just with Hanson, but with, the Iranian-backed sleeper cells up in Cleveland. Yeah, you know what I'm saying, because I knew how they related to the local GRU cell up there. But, the other thing, too, it's like, when you start talking about broken arrows and things like that, it's been an issue in the past with people going postal. That was, it was kind of a not exactly flattering term to refer to, like, disgruntled veterans who work for the Postal Service. But there were issues with them back in the 80s. And, a lot of it, still 50 to 1 and near to be outdone pushing all their buttons. You know what I'm saying? And, it comes down to usually, it's like I said, federal oaths being inviolate without outside assistance. So there's other issues there too, but then you got the whole, the First Blood book by David Morrell. That was actually, if you read the book, it was set in eastern Kentucky. And there's a guy that I know whose father was 1/4 Cherokee Indian, who was anything but, a vagrant, because he owned a lot of property and coal mines out in eastern Kentucky. But he was also a 20-year veteran of the 101st Airborne. And, he was, he had 20 years plus, because he was a reservist after that, too. So, he was in Korea, and he was in Vietnam. He was one of the first people to go over there and stuff like that. But, there's a lot of issues with that, and it's got more to do with, like, the Hunter S. Thompson gonzo journalism type thing, because basically you just sit around and get stoned and make up stories about people. But, because, if you read the original book, First Blood, Rambo was a domestic terrorist. I mean, he was not a good guy, and I don't know how that became what it did. I didn't hate the movie, because, like I said, there were issues there with, certain law enforcement corruption, because you have to read between the lines to see the, where Rambo was violated in jail and stuff like that, because, that kind of stuff still happens here. I know there was one case we took out back in around 2008, at FCDC, where a person got fired for sodomizing prisoners. So that's the kind of thing that tends to push people over the edge, just saying. But it still comes down to the whole broken arrow type thing, because, like I said, Polito was pretty much a fine example of what happens when one of those, protective clauses from one of Hanson's spoon-fed cases, runs out. So heads up on that. That's something you got to watch out for. But I'm going to backtrack here a little bit. I got one of these, I got something wrong here. So we'll start with line 1289. With tack from a horse and sword for discourse, and chainmail and leather with an odd dwarven helm. Ere to abide, for to be a good ride, Esmeralda sought nothing from her father's fair realm. Ever he a frown wore Derrick from town, his mettle yet met, brought he rope and a net. Wise to device, his demeanor like ice, what blue of his eyes, and his blood for to let. Ruddy and pale with his sword and chainmail, what qualm for to quell before he foes fell? Raven-hued was his hair, pitch would compare, darkly determined one's doom would he spell. Loris of Drakmar, though slighter by far, was like in his appearance and manner. Though skilled as a sage, this unlettered mage shine bright as a much better planner. The spell prepared for Morpheus to dare the drop shaft, for he was tall and quite broad. Not quite condescension, this ounce of prevention, or put down, this diminution to laud. Fell fate to deplore, Feline did implore, for her brother Gangor, whose sword she did trust. He lanky and lithe, fell foes for to scythe, Gangor the barbarian, but a must. Now feeling quite safe was Jenna the waif, of dangers too brave, for to get ahead. She her own hero, questing to zero, aspired once more, having room in a bed. Sorceress of means, least not though was Eve, last neither, though what vague presence was felt. Penultimate perhaps, presence to lapse, gut quibbles, mused she, as donned she her belt. Ill air or omen, darkly foreboding, or yesterday's pork up for an encore? Still non-compliant, her stomach in riot, this vague unease felt best to be ignored. What shade to deplore they made for the door, and to the market alley by midnight. They made for the shaft as night reached its haft, no shadows to dance or were-rats to fight. The stone which they'd mark they found in the dark, by letter to fetter on their regress. A stone for to pry and spell for to scry, to better unfetter, path to digress. Lest girth for to prize with giant downsize, descended they down the narrow drop shaft. Plummet and duck, they pounced upon the muck, then onward to the stone arches collapse. A brief pause for light, lit torches for sight, as shadows did dance across the cut stone. Near 3 paces wide, sheer drops either side, would cascade below, haps best not be known. Tingle within, air electric had been, the brightness unfolding made quite a start, as Loris of Drakmar, though useless by far, bled light from his staff, thus indulging his art. Brilliant and bright was this magic fey light, illuminating well he the chamber's full height. Off to the left, opposite the great cleft, arches of stone, illuminated bright. What mystery lay beyond yonder mist's display? The secret once kept in this forgotten dark deep. Had hundreds of men labored here back when, their purpose in secret thus for to keep? A landing soft on spongy spore tailings, with caper and join thus tapered the noise, drowned out by the thunder of tumultuous wonder, the aqueduct sundered, froth flowed with poise. With spell for to thwart the chasm abort, her billowing cloak silent in passing, a rope beckoned she behind let her be, no warning gave she of her power amassing. Now down with some might hammered she a spike, to fasten a rope, her resolve inured. Across came the rest, the rope put to test, to divest this dilemma with progress procured. No pause to deride upon the other side, but for Morpheus to regain his prior size. Momentarily height returned thus unto he, for to be wise his diminution excised. The rest came then after they across the collapse, a bridge of stone which had stood for countless ages, past awful and rot this sardonic lot, and onto a cave where had waited their wages. With tumult behind them the passage declined, downward and away the path before them lay, slithering and listless its path hidden by mist. There oozing in darkness, what mindless thing prayed? That's it for tonight. Have a good night and thank you for listening. More to come.